Just Mercy, based on the true story of Bryan Stevenson, a civil rights attorney who works to free a man wrongly convicted and sentenced to death, played by Jamie Foxx. The film stars and is co-produced by Michael B. Jordan, who plays the role of Bryan Stevenson, his attorney.
I can't believe you talked to all my people and said you're gonna fight for me.
I did.
That mean a lot.
And after an exclusive private screening, Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, and Bryan Stevenson joined myself and Yasmin Evans for an exclusive Q&A session in central London for BBC Radio 1 Extra.
Now, Michael, what was it about this film? I mean, I've listened to a few interviews that you've done, and you said when I came across Bryan, it was like coming across a superhero.
Yeah.
Not only are you starring in this film, you co-produced it. So what was it about this film that was just sucked you in?
I think for me, it was when I read his memoir and I started to understand the work that he was doing. I felt a little embarrassed that I didn't know that much about him. I was like, man, how does he exist? And I never knew it. So I got a chance to listen to his TED Talk and hear him speak, and got a chance to meet him and get to know him over a period of time. And I guess it was the feeling of like, why isn't he a household name? What could I do? How can I use my platform to get him to the masses? So I kind of ran towards the idea of making this movie. And he's been so involved with us writing the script and developing draft after draft over about 4 or 5 years. And we finally felt like we got it in the right place. Warner Brothers came on board to help distribute and get this movie seen around the world. And it was I don't know. I wanted people to have that same feeling of self-discovery or of discovering Bryan Stevenson like I did, and yeah, just I had to do it. I mean, how could I not? You know what I'm saying? It's like, being black in America, being wearing the skin, with the presumption of guilt that comes along with it. How to help change that narrative. How can I help, change the perception of what it is to be black.
You don't know what you into down here, do you? You think all them fancy words gonna get you somewhere around here in Alabama? All they gonna do is eat you alive and spit you out just like every other black man they do when they step out of line. You come out here with them fancy suits, talking all white. These people don't give a damn about that. The only suit they wanna see again is the suit I got on.
Miss McMillan, I can see how that could be hard.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You rich boy from Harvard, you don't know what it is down here when you're guilty from the moment you're born.
Jamie, you grew up in Texas, obviously, and the film was set in Alabama. Now, what parallels did you find in Just Mercy?
Well, I first of all, I love being where I'm from, being from the South and everything like that, but there are some things that you can draw upon when it comes to the racial divide. The fact that I am from the South gave me a little bit of intel on what it's like to have that type of racism in your face. I come from Terrell, Texas. Nobody? Okay, nobody? Okay, nobody? Okay, nobody? But my town is a very small town, 12,000 people. But when you talk about the racial component, there was a young man by the name of Barack Hussein Obama. Anybody know who that is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, when he won president in 2008, the only newspaper production not to put him on the front of the newspaper was Terrell, Texas. Wow. So in our newspaper, it's only 6 pages. And so, it's small. So even if you didn't vote for him, it's a keepsake. And to let you know the temperature, CNN went down to interview our newspaper, and they said, why didn't you put him on the front of the newspaper? And they said, hey, listen, we run a newspaper, not a scrapbook. So you understand where I come from. It doesn't say that all people in the South are that, but those people that are in charge, those people who have been voted into positions are the ones who can make life very uncomfortable as a black person. So I'm happy to be a part of this, and I think this is the most important movie I've ever done.
The first time I visited death row, I wasn't expecting to meet somebody the same age as me. Grew up on the same music, from a neighborhood just like ours. Could have been me, Mama.
Michael, for you as a black actor, how important is it for you to kind of take on these roles? And is this something that you are now continuing to do?
I think for me, being able to do, bigger films and, blockbusters, action movies and all that good stuff is fun and it's great and it's entertaining and I love it. But I think I'm always going to come back and do stories like this. I'll always be able to give a voice to the voiceless and shine lights on stories that need to be seen. And that's just going to be how I move. It's not even a question. I think with Fruitvale, it was something that at the time Trayvon Martin had just got shot, and I was super frustrated. I was boiling to the point where I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't know how to express myself. And then, thank God that Ryan came along, and I got a chance to collaborate with him and tell that story. And the feeling of expressing yourself through your work in a movie like that, it changed me. It made me grow up in a big way. I matured, and after doing this movie, I'm gonna take this feeling, these lessons that I've learned, this scope, this vision, the things that I've seen. I'm gonna take it with me for the rest of my life. So I'm gonna definitely continue to tell these stories.
Do you have any idea the bull that I've had to put up with since your 60 Minutes story aired? I got Rhonda's family checking in every 5 minutes.
You can't keep an innocent man in prison while you try to salvage your reputation.
This is about the people of this county who have hired me to keep them safe.
And what people are you talking about right now? The ones from this neighborhood? Or the ones from the black community you took Johnny D from? You think they feel safe? Your job isn't to defend a conviction, Tommy. It's to achieve justice. And as long as you keep fighting this, someone from your county has literally gotten away with murder.
You want to come all the way to my house at dinner time just to tell me how to do my job?
No, I'm here because I think you know the difference between right and wrong.
So Bryan, this film is obviously based on the book that you wrote and obviously your amazing work. What was it like the first time you saw this on the big screen?
It was surreal, just because in all of my years representing people on death row, going into jails and prisons, standing next to people who have been condemned, people have been told that their life has no meaning or purpose or value. I've always wanted people to kind of wake up and pay attention. We've got thousands of innocent people in jails and prisons in America. We have people who are treated so cruelly. When I wrote the book, I was hoping that people would read it, and I was so floored when people did. And then when the movie came along, I was really excited. I was apprehensive at first because, Hollywood doesn't always get this right. And that's why I'm also so grateful to Michael, because when he got involved, it was clear that he's not only talented and creative, but he's also really dedicated to these issues. And he put his heart into it. And then when Jamie came on, you could see in his performance, his whole heart is in this performance. And you see the weight and the pain and the anguish and the suffering that so many of us have had to endure because we are presumed guilty, we are presumed dangerous. And then when the rest of the cast gave all of that, I was really moved. I was really honored. And I can't tell you how excited I am now to share this with the world. I've always believed that if people saw what I see on a regular basis, if you saw children being put in adult jails and prisons where they're abused, if you saw mothers having to get pulled away from kids or being put in prison for life, if you had to meet people whose loved ones were going to be put in an electric chair and executed, you'd begin to understand the depth of this problem, the weight of this problem. And now, through these extraordinary performances, people will get to see that. And I think when they see that, they'll be motivated to do things. I think they'll be motivated to do what we say in the film, which is to stand up even though others will say, sit down. They'll be motivated to speak even though others will say, be quiet. They'll be motivated to pick up the mantle. We're from America, and we couldn't be where we are if people hadn't fought and bled and died to create the opportunities that we have. I'm standing on the shoulders of people who did so much more with so much less. And I want to honor what they did, what they gave to me. And we just want that to be given to another generation. And I think this film can play an important role in opening minds, but also opening hearts. And so it's been really exciting for me.
You said that Hollywood sometimes changed the narrative. We basically watched a movie length of something that you lived for years.
Yeah.
Was there something in those years that you were like, look, this has to be in the film?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that was really important to me is that the Herbert Richardson story and that execution was an important part of the film. You know, I believe that each person is more than the worst thing they've ever done. I think none of us are just crimes. I think if somebody tells a lie, they're not just a liar. If somebody takes something, they're not just a thief. Even if you kill somebody, you're not just a killer.
Whatever you did, your life is still meaningful. And I'm gonna do everything possible to keep them from taking it.
And that idea was really important to me. And, you know, Jamie plays a character who was innocent. O'Shea plays a character who was innocent. I didn't want the story to be all innocent people, because if we got all of the innocent people out of jails and prisons, we'd still have an unjust system. You can be guilty and unfairly sentenced. You can be guilty and excessively punished. And so Herbert's story, Herbert who did something wrong, but nonetheless was traumatized by his time in Vietnam, that was an important part of the story for me, you know. And when I see the film, you know, I lived through, you know, what happened that night, and it was just so surreal going to the prison. And we have that conversation that you see, and Herbert saying, you know, how strange the day had been. You know, they do shave your body before they put you in the electric chair to execute you. And when he said to me that night, you know, Bryan, it's been so strange because all day long people have been saying, what can I do to help you? And when he said, they came to me in the morning to say, what do you want for breakfast? And at midday, they said, what do you want for lunch? In the evening, they said, what do you want for dinner? And he kept saying, Bryan, they've been saying all day long, what can I do to help you? And I never will forget him saying, he said, Bryan, it's been so strange. More people have said, what can I do to help you in the last 14 hours of my life than they ever did in the first 19 years of my life. And when I was holding that man's hands, I couldn't help but think, yeah, where were they when you were 3 and your mom died? And where were they when you were 7 and you were being abused? And where were they when you were 14 experimenting with drugs? Where were they when you came back from Vietnam, having given your life, risked your life to save this country? They abandoned you and they lined up to execute you. And the pain of having him pulled away and strapped into that electric chair was really, really challenging. But it was important for me to see that, to see Michael's performance, to experience that, to Rob's performance, because until we understand the pain of injustice, the weight of inequality, the brutality of bigotry and bias, we're not going to do the fight the right way. And that's the really inspiring thing for me, that if we can revive this hopefulness, this belief that we can create a more just system, then it's not just a movie anymore. It's a statement about what happens when people pull together and they use their voices to fight for the things that matter.
Absolutely. Whew. Bryan, an absolute word. Sorry. And that's it, guys. Thank you, firstly, for continuing to share, because hearing you talk about it is something different that we actually don't get from the movie, because you are the person that is going through this. So to share that emotion with us, just on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much. Thank you.
So Jamie, we've seen you in so many different movies, so many different characters. What was it about Walter Macmillan how did you channel the energy of Walter?
Well, first of all, aesthetically we look alike. Like we had the same, you know, cheekbones and the diamond head and the box cut. I had that in the '80s. So that when you're trying to portray a character that's actually lived, that helps because he wasn't around for me to ask questions. But with Michael and Bryan, there, you know. Bryan would let me know that he was still gregarious. He was still hopeful in this bad situation. Now, I've been to death row before, and the worst thing you can give a death row inmate is hope. And so, but he said, but Walter was the opposite of that. And so that's why you see in the movie, which I thought Destin and Michael put this together beautifully, the fact that the three inmates, the way we interacted, I thought that was really important for the film, because you could see beyond the horrible situation, they were still human. And so we were able to, I think by doing that, people could like really tap into, you know, who we were. And then when it came to the way he spoke, just being from the South and having that speech, we talked about how much of that we wanted to do because we still wanted it to be audible. We wanted people to understand what I was saying, but we also wanted to make you understand that he is from a specific region, and being from that region, even in the voice, you could tell that something is different. So putting the character together was one, and then the jail. You know, I don't like jail. I ain't like none of that part of going into jail. And I said, let's shoot this shit and get on out of here. But it was an interesting thing when we were going into the jail. The correctional officer that was the actor asked the real correctional officer, you know, what do we do with the cuffs? And, you know, they're behind me, but he didn't know I can hear him, but he leaned over and says, put him on tighter. He's a bigger one. And I said, hey, man, the cuffs is tight enough. Don't, you know. But that put something in my head that when I went in and by the time I was talking to Mike, all of the anger, all of the everything, you know, makes the character now take off in the right direction. So that was basically finding Walter.
With that in mind, Michael, there's a scene where Bryan gets pulled over by the police and he's harassed. It's quite a difficult scene for many of us to watch. What were you trying to kind of get across in that instance? You know, Jamie's saying you embody these characters, you become them. So the real frustration can come out of you. And I guess it is up to you then to kind of get the skill to control yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pulled over multiple times, you know, for no reason at all. Car searched, you know, the whole nine. That's unfortunately it's common. It's expected. It's something, you know, before, you know, as a kid, your parents sit you down and give you the, you know, the talk of what it means to be black outside of the house. You know, how do you interact with law enforcement? How do you deal with authority? How do you conduct yourself at, you know, at a routine stop? You know, so you know, we're kind of desensitized a little bit to that. So for specifically for the scene, you know, what that feels like, what does it feel like to be, you know, violated in that type of way, but still remembering where you are, you know, knowing, you know, that you have things you have to do, you have to act a certain type of way. You know, Bryan had to be very thoughtful and reserved and restrained in his line of work, especially down in the South. So in that moment, you know, he couldn't. It was one of the few times you really saw him on the borderline of really reacting, you know, without really thinking about the consequences, you know. And I wanted to kind of show him walk right up to that edge and then remember what he had to do, where he had to go, who he was fighting for. So much of his work is putting his own ego and pride to the side for the betterment of his client, you know. And I just wanted to. That's such a huge part of him and who he is. I just wanted to make sure that was consistent and truthful throughout the movie.
Bryan, how much guidance did you give Michael in playing you?
Well, I mean, he's really talented. I mean, people don't really appreciate the kind of skill that these men have. And when I met Michael, it was already clear that he had thought a lot about how to do this. And to be honest, when I first met him, the thing that blew me away, it wasn't, you know, how skilled as an actor he was. It wasn't how talented it was. It was how genuinely nice he is. He's a good human being. This is a really solid human being, and he doesn't have the pretense and the ego that I expected. And that just made me really hopeful that we could work together in a way that could really be powerful, and we have, and he was just fantastic. I think we spent a lot of time on sort of the choreography of moving in a courtroom, because you can actually, this is the thing, as a lawyer, when you watch these lawyer movies, the thing that really frustrates you is when people do things you just can't ever do in a court, you know, and I didn't want that to be part of this film. And he really mastered that choreography. He knew where to stand, he knew where to move, he knew how to position himself. We were just doing something, I was watching it again, and he really has it down. And so, you know, we talked about things like that, but most of it was just the heart. You know, and you heard him say it. You know, to do the kind of work I do, you have to be tactical and strategic. You know, if all we needed was anger to create justice, we would have had justice a long time ago. You've got to be tactical. You've got to figure out how to move people from point A to point B. And he really brought that to the performance. He was very, very committed to being authentic, to being true. We used some of the actual transcripts in the script for the film. And so it was a real thrill working with him. I mean, I joke with him because I said, he was talking about authenticity so much that I said, well, now the one area where we don't have to be authentic, you don't have to lose that Black Panther Creed body when you play me. And
We'll just keep that.
Yeah, you can keep that. Yeah, that's all right. I don't have a problem with that. But it was, and it's been such a thrill for me. I've gotten to spend a lot of time with these guys. I love these guys. They are really wonderful human beings who care deeply about these issues, and that's an unexpected thrill for me in doing this project, is to get to work with wonderful people like Michael and Jamie. That's been a real honor.
You mentioned the courtroom, that final courtroom scene. Like Jamie and Michael, what was that like to shoot? What was it like being on the set that day?
When you get a script, you circle certain scenes that you really look forward to doing. You're like, all right, this is the day, this is the big, courtroom scene. It's a lot of dialogue. Like Bryan said, I couldn't really ad-lib or improv that because it's exactly what he said. So I couldn't. So I know I had to get all that stuff down pretty tight. And I was anxious, man. I wanted to get it right really bad. It was the courtroom was packed. It was a long day too. It was a long day. What's up, man? I see you over there. What's up?
No, he's. This to me was the most incredible part of the filming, because he wanted to get that speech right, and people. If I could make you understand, like, there's two different Hollywoods. There's a celebrity who just wants to be, the Hollywood and that, but then there's the people who are actually the actors. And so during that scene, he cared about it, and he did mess up a couple of times. He flubbed lines a couple of times.
For sure.
But he's so nice every time he mess up. Oh, sorry, bro. Sorry about that. Sorry, bro. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, man, I'm sorry. My bad. And so I pulled him to the side and said, hey, you don't have to apologize. This is your film. You put this together. You ain't got to apologize to us. I said, if it take you 30 minutes to say one line, take it. That boy went over there, did something, I don't know what he did, got his mind together, came back, and then he lullabied it. And it was so incredible that the extras gave him a standing ovation, right? And then I went to, to touch his arm to congratulate, and he, he jerked away. I said, uh-oh. And then they walked out. I said, oh, and black people call that the Holy Ghost. So he was like, oh. He's got the Holy Spirit. And so I was proud, I was like, oh, he did it. And then I texted him, I said, what you just did was monumental. The people in the fourth row are weeping. And so, in other words, you don't see that a lot. You don't see someone actually care, and the fact that he cared about it makes it amazing.
It's easy to see this case as one man trying to prove his innocence. But when you take a black man and you put him on death row a year before his trial and exclude black people from serving on his jury, when you base your conviction on the coerced testimony of a white felon and ignore the testimony of 24 law-abiding black witnesses, when any evidence proving his innocence is suppressed and anyone who tries to tell the truth is threatened, this case becomes more than the trial of just a single defendant. It becomes a test of whether we're going to be governed by fear and by anger or by the rule of law.
Yeah, and Jamie, he held me down. Like, I've known Jamie for a really long time, and he's been a mentor, to me, and always giving me advice. And throughout this whole movie, this whole process, I couldn't imagine anybody else championing me the way he has. And I've learned so much, and just little things you lose track of wanting something so bad in the moment. Just those little words that he told me made all the difference for that scene for me. So I owe a lot of that to him.
Well, you killed it.
Look at that. Guys, we could honestly talk to you about this for a really long time. First of all, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Bryan, thank you so much for sharing your story. Michael, Jamie, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of something so amazing, creating something so amazing.
Thank you guys for being here and doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. Guys, please give it up for our special guests this evening. Jamie Foxx, Michael B. Jordan, and Bryan Stevenson.
you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to keep up to date. For more great audio and video from the BBC, listen on Sounds, watch on iPlayer.